Hi, in this video I'm going to talk about PDF forms as course materials. I created another video where I talked about how to actually produce PDF forms, and I used Microsoft Word to compose the document, and then I brought it into Adobe Acrobat Pro and I made a form out of it that could be used as a course material. So the larger question, that's how to do it, but what about this question here? What does it take to develop and deliver these types of materials at a unit or a departmental level? So this video is going to discuss that. Well, let us begin. So in particular, I'm going to talk about PDF forms as course materials, and I'll discuss version 1. So in the early days of making these at the departmental level, and then version 2. So later on, after I learned some lessons, how I changed designing and developing these things. Next, moving on to, I'll talk about some mobile learning pedagogy related to the PDF forms. I'm not going to cover the whole scope of mobile learning pedagogy. I'm focusing with regard to PDF forms. I'll talk about having an academic program and using these types of materials in such a program. I'll talk about workflow. So how do you, what's a good way to actually go about making these things? And then finally I'll talk a little bit about distribution, sharing these things. And you can see there I have 3 different covers for 3 different courses. And what I did is I used green for one course, and I used purple for another course, and red for another course. And I would use these covers on consistently throughout the course. I wouldn't keep changing colors. So let's look at an example, what I call e-readers, which is essentially a PDF form. You can see that I created a branded cover. That is, it has the university logo, it has the college in which I work, and it has the specific department in which this material will be delivered, and it has the little e-reader and the name of the course and the title of the e-reader itself. In this case, it says cheap fakes come at a very high price for the UAE. A little photo, name, ID, student name, ID, and section, things like that. And that was standard. So I was using that kind of as a template. For every e-reader that I made, every PDF form that I made, I had a cover like that. I created a design of a cover, and then I would just change the title or something like this. All right, so I had consistent layout. And another thing to note about these PDF forms is that they're really nice about working on different platforms, whether it's a laptop or an iPad or even a mobile phone. PDF forms, as long as you have some kind of software on all of these devices, it will work well on all of those devices. So you can see on the second page there that I usually had I would provide a table of contents, and I would provide the learning goals that the PDF form, the e-reader, was targeting, and I would have some warm-up questions. And in this kind of version 1, the early days of creating these, I would do something like this one was a news article that I had pulled out. So that's on the third page there. There's a news article with the reference provided, and it's hyperlinked. And then there'd be questions related to that news article. Some of them were you had to enter text, and other ones they were radio buttons, multiple choice questions. So reading comprehension or responding to the reading, things like that. So that was kind of the version 1. That was the early days. I developed this type of standard cover. The next page always kind of had listed the contents and had the learning goals, some warm-up questions. Then it would have an article or something like that, and then there'd be questions related to the article. Well, so what is version 2 then? Well, version 2, one thing that was different was I made sure everything was 1-inch margins. If we look back at version 1, on the cover, you can see that the purple shape there goes past the 1-inch margin. Oops. On the new one, everything is 1-inch margin. And the reason why was because I was creating new ones, new e-readers, and I would run into trouble with the margins, and it was, things were jumping all around when I wasn't staying within the 1-inch margin. So I made everything so that it was fitting within the 1-inch margin. You can see that the cover, other than that, the cover looks basically the same. I stopped using pictures on the front of them because I was getting tired of looking for Creative Commons photos that were appropriate or whatever. I just went and just had the title, and that's it. Next, on the next page, you can see that I still have the contents, table of contents, but it's becoming much more in depth. That this table of contents is a lot bigger than the other one in the version 1. And that's because this e-reader is taking on a different life. The first one was really about an article, or maybe it was a documentary or something, or whatever it was, but there was some other content somewhere, and the e-reader was just referring to it and creating questions. So it was either referring to an article or referring to a documentary and creating questions around that. This version of the e-reader contains the content, and you can see that on the third page there, where I'm actually providing the instruction there. I've written in all of the instruction. We're talking about these different ideas, different concepts related to, in this case, introduction paragraphs, and we're providing all of that instruction within the e-reader, and in this case, in this way, it's becoming more like a textbook. You can see that we still have activities and questions that are an extension of the instruction that was provided inside of this mini workbook, this mini textbook. You can see that we still have in the blue there on the last page a place where they can enter text, and also the multiple choice items there. You can see there's some red questions and those things. Again, this e-reader works across platform, across different devices, so it's nice. So in summary, the difference between the version 1 and the version 2 of the PDF forums is that they became more sophisticated, and they became more like textbooks, and that these little textbooks were presenting the content. They weren't just presenting questions referring to content that was developed somewhere else. In fact, we developed the content ourselves and created activities and exercises around that. And the nice thing about that, if it's done well, it has a very long shelf life, so to speak. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Turning to mLearning pedagogy. When most people think about mobile learning, they're thinking about constructivism. Constructivism, well, what are the principles of constructivism, are some of the focal points? Well, one of them is that it tends to be student-driven discovery. Constructivism has the idea that we look at what people already have when they come into the classroom, and whatever they learn is an extension from what they already have. And in fact, they are generating that learning, a lot of it, they're generating it themselves. And especially in groups. This is what Constructivism is. As opposed to Instructivism, which I'll talk about in a moment. So Constructivism is student-driven discovery, tends to focus on resourcefulness and creativity. It targets deep learning by challenging students to discover things. And it often, with Constructivism, we're often looking at active groups, getting them to, the idea is that in a group, the combined knowledge and creativity is more than it would be as an individual. So that's social constructivism. Those are some of the drivers behind mobile learning, pedagogy, constructivism, especially in the West. That's huge. Applying constructivism to a digital mobile environment and looking at how we can leverage that. Now, what I am advocating with these PDF forms is not so much constructivism, and I'll elaborate on that in a moment, but what I'm targeting with these PDF forms is, sorry, I forgot one last thing, and that's with mobile learning and constructivism, we're looking at anytime, anywhere learning. Okay, instructivism. So that's the traditional expert to novice instruction. It's a teacher in a classroom delivering their expert knowledge to the students. And with that scenario, you're not really looking at what does that student already have in their head, what do they already know. Instead, what you're doing is you're setting a benchmark and you're saying, you have to know at least this. You may know it already or you may not, but you need to know it, and I'm going to tell it to you and I'm going to check it after. That's kind of the instructivist model, traditional model. And maybe if you're a teacher, you can think about how many times have you actually done that? Have you gone into the room with some body of knowledge and really just started presenting it and not really investigating how much do the students truly know? If you have 20 students, how much do you actually check? Do they know that thing that you're going to talk about? A lot of time we make the assumption that they kind of don't know it, or they don't know it to the level of expertise that we would want. That's our assumption. So we go ahead and we teach it. That's instructivism. So with the PDF forms, what we're looking at doing is capturing this type of classroom-based repetitive instruction. The things that we teach, they're not always new and novel things. You know, from semester to semester, year to year, or even from class to class, week to week, there are some things that we repeat over and over to students. We recycle that knowledge. Those are the things that are suitable for going into a PDF form, an e-reader, what I'm calling e-readers, that type of instruction. And it's really good for English language teaching environments where you have students for whom English maybe is not a first language. Otherwise, students come into the class, they have 1 hour or 2 hours to try to understand what you're saying, and then they go out of the class, and if they've taken notes or they've listened well, maybe they've captured what you were trying to impart to them, or maybe not. The nice thing about having a PDF e-reader with all of that instruction captured inside of it is that the student can take that away, they can review it, they can talk to their classmates about it, and if they have any questions, they can come back to you. So it's not just you have to be in the classroom for this little bit of time in order to get this piece of teaching, this piece of instruction. It's about having that instruction, you deliver it in class, but also it's complemented by the PDF e-reader or PDF form, and the students can take that away with them. They can study it, they can learn it at home, there can be exercises inside of it to reinforce the concepts that you're trying to teach, and so forth. So the PDF forms are nice for that as well, an English language teaching environment. As well, these things, you know, if the students have downloaded these PDF forms to their iPad or their computer, it's nice for individual learning activities. So you're targeting full participation, really, with these PDF forms. It may not be the robust, deep, student-driven discovery of constructivism, but it does allow a student individually to focus on content, to address the questions that you've created and things like that. That student can bring that back to the classroom. It can be reviewed as part of a homework assignment, things like that. So if you don't have that type of activity, whether it's homework or what it is, whatever, are you really getting to everybody in the class? Is everybody in the class participating? So that's an open question. With PDF e-readers or PDF forms, I make sure with my students that everybody is participating in some way. Now, the question is, which one is better, constructivism or instructivism? My argument is they're both good. You might choose some, depending on your course and depending on your own abilities and interests as a teacher, you might choose to do 75% of your course as constructivism, that deep learning, student-driven discovery, using all kinds of different technologies in the mobile learning space to do that, videos, creation of videos, all kinds of things. And you might have another 25% that's bottled up in these PDF forms, in these, you know, this captured classroom-based repetitive instruction that's captured up into a PDF form. It's really up to the instructor, maybe to the program, about what percentage of a certain course is constructivist and how much of it is instructivist. I won't say how much percent you should have. I don't think that instructivism should be the whole pie. It's a piece of the pie. It's a piece of the mLearning pie. It's not the whole thing. And there is a place for it. There's a place for both forms of a teaching approach. There's definitely a place for constructivism, and there's definitely a place for instructivism. I think that's especially true in the Middle East, where traditionally there has been a strong instructivist form of education. Okay, so you can look at it as having a class that has some percentage of instructivism and some percentage of constructivism. Another way to look at it is maybe you're going to start teaching your students through instructivist methods and then transition them over to constructivist methods. There's a lot of different ways to handle it. So the next thing on pedagogy, this is a rather famous model, the SAMR model of technology integration. With PDF readers, so we have substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. With substitution, the technology acts as a direct tool substitute with no functional change. So for example, you have a piece of paper where you have a question and the student can write an answer underneath. You have that same piece of paper, you have a question, and there's multiple choice and they tick one of the boxes with their pen. Well, how is an e-reader, for example, that has little radio buttons that someone can select digitally, or text that they can enter digitally, how is that different from the piece of paper? And I would say, by and large, on the surface, it is not different. Then you might say, well, why do it? And I would say there's a couple of reasons. So number one, moving in, it's a nice way to gently move into the mobile learning space. So for example, if you targeted redefinition, where you're really transforming the education that's happening where you work, and you're doing it all of a sudden, that change is simply too big for people to adopt. You're going to get a lot of pushback on that. So what I recommend is going in lightly with substitution. So instead of, you substitute an iPad for a piece of paper, for example. And substitution here, it says with no functional change there. It's a direct tool substitute with no functional change. However, I would argue that substituting an iPad, for the paper, even though it's still checkboxes and entering text, there is a functional change. It's a different device, it's a different medium. In order to access that document, you have to follow different procedures. There's a variety of things with regard to changing habit. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm looking at bringing in a digital technology to substitute for, let's say, a piece of paper, is I'm looking at not the product itself, not the piece of paper, not the PDF form. I'm looking at changing people's habit, that they're turning to their iPad now instead of going to the printer room and printing off documents for their students. I mean, that's a change. That's a big change in habit for a lot of people. Students, instead of asking for a printout, that they get used to going to their course management shell, and we'll talk about Blackboard in a moment, something like Blackboard, and downloading the document. So substitution, on the surface, it might not seem like it's very important. Like, why substitute a piece of paper for a PDF form on the iPad, right? Like, what's the big deal? It's still checkboxes, it's still text, writing. That's, on the surface, that is true. But the habits and the procedures behind it are substantial. There's some major shifts. And that's just at the substitution level. The next level up, augmentation, is you're looking at how can that PDF form, for example, be used in a way that really paper, can't do, for example. And then higher up and higher up in terms of new things and interesting things that maybe the technology can afford. For an initial implementation, I tend to target substitution and target changing people's habits. And with PDF form, I don't think that has to be, that the PDF form has to go from substitution to augmentation to modification to redefinition. It doesn't need to do it all. As the previous slide illustrated, PDF form is just one piece of the pie. You can do a lot of different other things with regard to mobile learning beyond PDF that look at redefinition and modification. PDF doesn't have to go all the way up the ladder. PDF is one piece of the pie, and in this instance, we're looking at it to substitute for paper, and we're targeting changing people's habits. Let's turn to the program now. So you've decided, okay, you're going to go ahead with creating course materials digitally, and you're going to do it using PDF forms because they're nice cross-platform. They're nice course materials for going across different platforms like an iPad or a laptop or even a mobile phone. So the yellow, highlighted in yellow, is course materials. That's what these PDF forms are. Then, well, where does that exist in the whole constellation of the program? Because you have institutional outcomes, you have the curriculum for the entire program, you have different courses and the syllabi that outline different things that will be taught at different times. You have course outcomes, you have assessments related to those course outcomes, and the course materials, you know, are supposed to fit in with all of that. Now the trick is, I have never worked anywhere where this stuff wasn't undergoing revision. That's, you know, whether it was the curriculum or the institutional outcomes, whether course outlines were being redesigned. You know, so I mean, I have always, everywhere I've worked, these things are being revised, improved, and so forth. And if you have an environment in flux like that, then how do you actually, should we be making course materials? Isn't making course materials the last thing to do once you've figured out everything else? Theoretically, yes. I, however, would make the argument that producing these course materials is a worthwhile exercise, even if all of those other elements are not worked out yet. Why? Because a conversation needs to happen around, let's say, development of curriculum or development of course outcomes or assessments. Those conversations need to happen, but they don't happen very well when it's just talk. Producing concrete items like these e-readers, for example, which I've in a couple of months I have made probably about 30 of them, and we've been using them in the courses, and we've developed some procedures around how to make these things, and instructors are learning how to work with them, students are learning how to work with them. So now we could, for example, now have a meeting and talk about this first implementation of PDF forms. And you know, that would be an informed conversation. It wouldn't be hypothetical, theoretical, because people will have seen them and tried to work with them, and they can provide feedback on what worked, what didn't work, that these things need to be aligned to the syllabi and to the curriculum and things like that. And so none of this happens in isolation. Course materials being developed without having a solid curriculum in place, or that it is in flux, seems like a very strange thing. But doing it anyway is a valuable exercise. It moves the conversation forward so that it's not just talk anymore. It's grounded in something. And in that way, I think a program can start to demonstrate growth. Now, if the program does have all of these other things worked out, it just makes it that much easier to start producing these course materials. And another note would be that by trying something with good intent, you will learn lessons. You'll make mistakes and you'll learn lessons, and you'll carry that forward. So as these other things get worked out, it just improves what you've already learned. Workflow. I'll discuss the original workflow that I had set up, and then an evolved workflow. So the original workflow, there was one designer developer, me. And I sat in my office, and I had near autonomous, I had almost total control over the production. You know, I was making all of the decisions. People would say, a couple of people would say, I'm interested in working with this content, a documentary or an article, and they would simply say, can you make an e-reader for this? And that was the extent of the conversation. And then I would go away to my office and dream something up and produce it I'd make the Microsoft Word document, and then I'd turn that into a PDF form, and then it was finalized. And after it was finalized, it just kind of went out there to the department, and there were almost always some kind of mistakes in the final product. So in the early stage, that's how the workflow was. That's what it looked like. And I was learning how to produce these things, and people were coming to grips with understanding what e-readers or PDF forms as course materials meant. And eventually we got better at it. In short order, we got better at it. So with the little bit of evolution, we now had multiple designers. I wasn't exclusively designing these things. So now I was working with the course coordinators and the chairs. And if a course coordinator wanted an e-reader, for example, I would go to her office and I would get detailed information about what she was interested in. And the reason for that is what your client wants. So if I'm, the provider, and I consider everybody my client, if what the client wants is different from what I have in mind, it's important for me to figure out specifically what she's got in mind and build something toward that. So we had multiple designers. I'd go and sit in somebody's office, and we really work out the vision for a particular course material as a PDF form, and then I would take that information away and I would develop it. So again, one developer. But I think we're at the point now, it's worth thinking about, should there be more developers? More of these small teams producing these things. Another thing that happened was the proofreading. So I would create these PDF forms in their MS Word version before putting them into Acrobat and turning them into PDF. I create the MS Word version and send out the MS Word version to like the course coordinators and the chairs of the department and ask them to proofread it, to give feedback. And in this way, the e-readers, the course materials included multiple perspectives. That was always better than what I could do alone. And they also caught the errors. So these things were, by the end, they were almost error-free, right? So that's the difference between the original way that we tackled this and the more evolved way. My summary for that is I really recommend, if you're doing this at the departmental level, set up small teams. People, one, who can handle the technology, it's not complicated, to produce these things, and like these small groups where they will advise on the particular course materials to make. And that there would be proofreading. So you'd make a draft, it would get proofread, then that would be then you'd have a revision, and then you'd make the final version. So lastly, distribution. You've made these PDF forms. I call them e-readers. They've been designed at the level of the department. Certainly, so you're looking at courses that are delivered department-wide, and these materials are going to go out department-wide. It's not just an instructor and her course, or instructor his course anymore, like one-to-one. This material is going out to all the courses, to all the students in those courses, and used by multiple instructors, multiple faculty. So you've developed your materials to that level. Now, how do you distribute them? Well, what we do, of course, is we commonly have them housed in Blackboard, and students can access that through a Blackboard on their iPads or Blackboard on their laptops. They download it, and then we get them to open it in Adobe Acrobat, or sorry, not Acrobat, Adobe Reader. That lets them interact with the document. They can fill out forms, they can mark it up with a pen and like a digital pen and things like that. And then now the last process, last step, then what do the students want to do with it, right? What does the instructor want the student to do with it? Does the instructor want to receive it in an email? That's one option. You have to be clever about that though, because you don't want your email totally clogged up with these files, these big files. So email, unless you can filter your email and have these things coming in a way that is grouped apart from your regular inbox, then you don't want to have these things clogging up your email. Another one is open in. So open in Edmodo, open in Dropbox, open in Google Drive or something. So, you know, traditionally those are some of the options that people had. You know, I won't make a recommendation about any one of those. It's there's you know, open in WebDAV or something like this. There's different options for how to share these things. And to be honest with you, I haven't totally figured out yet a nice streamlined system for sharing these things, having students send them back to me. So mostly I'm just sending them out to students, getting them to work with it, and then in class I have another piece of technology on my computer where they can share their work live. It's on their iPad and I can see it on my computer, and that gets projected up onto the screen. So that right now, that's as far as I go with having the students feed their PDF forms back to me. I haven't yet collected them in a systematic way. I'm still trying to figure out how that goes. So there it is. I'll flash back to one of the to the beginning there. So I discussed PDF forms as course materials. I talked about the version 1, which was really looking at some piece of external content, whether it was a news article or a documentary, and making questions around that. And in version 2, what we started doing was we started making these things as mini textbooks for which we developed our own content, instruction especially. Those things that we are constantly teaching our students, we're starting to capture that into these documents, into these PDF forms, into these what we call e-readers. I talked about mLearning pedagogy, the difference between Constructivism and Instructivism. Many times faculty who know something about mLearning will say, how are these PDF forms mLearning? They're not, you know, constructivist. They're not looking at group work and you know, this student-driven discovery and things like that. And my argument is that mLearning is more than that. That is a dominant form of mLearning, especially in the West. But you know, teaching isn't just about constructivism. There is a place for instructivism in teaching as well, especially in the Middle East. And so these PDF forms, for the most part, they are targeting instructivism, and that's just one piece of the pie. It's not the total pie, it's just one piece of it. And on the SAMR model for substitution, substituting a piece of paper, you know, bringing in the iPad with a PDF form, it's not just a one-to-one. That also includes changing people's habits, getting them working with digital devices, laptops, iPads, things like that, instead of always going to the printer room and printing stuff off and bringing papers to class. It's, I mean, that's a big thing, really. What else do we have? We talked about the program that, you know, why would you go about creating course materials when you don't have other elements of your program worked out yet? My argument there is that you have to move forward. You can't just stay in the conversation about we need to do this, we need to do that. Start producing, start making stuff. Try it out. See what works, see what doesn't. Revise. See how this piece of the puzzle fits with the other pieces of the puzzle, and even if those things are messy. Because I think it doesn't have to be lockstep. First, you need to create the curriculum. Then you create the learning outcomes. And I mean, all of that can be happening synergistically at the same time. You know, there are different ways to go about building a program. And what I have noticed in creating these things is it contributes to an informed conversation about course materials, about curriculum, and things like that. So it's a work in progress, and it's a tangible, concrete thing that we can refer to. So I highly recommend creating these things. Not to say they are perfect as they are, but we're learning as we go, and those lessons are important. Workflow, it's great. It's a very, very good idea to create small teams to produce these things. You want to find out what exactly people are thinking when they want to create a particular e-reader. It's a good idea to have a standard layout and a cover and things like this. Somebody develops it, sends that out for proofreading, revises it, creates a finished version, and that is what goes out to the department. Gets one last check and then goes out to the department. And for it to go out to the department, distribution, so somewhere where we're working, we're using Blackboard. We house these things in Blackboard. They could also be put in WebDAV or another storage distribution system. And there it is. So that is an overview of the this higher level conversation around PDF forms as course materials. If you have not watched the other video on how to create these forms, I recommend that you take a look. Okay, thank you.